Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trechek.
And me, Aileen Rutledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland. So welcome everybody to this week's episode of the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. As you may or may not know, myself and Aideen met originally when we did some work with AOTI on the Communications Committee, and one of our fellow Communications Committee members was Yvonne Pennisi. Yvonne is an occupational therapy lecturer in UCC, originally of Australian descent, so has lots of insights in terms of Australia. But what we know and love Yvonne for is her crazy, colourful hair, which looks different every time we see her, and her very outspoken views. Yvonne, you're very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. No, thanks. That's actually a very apt way to introduce me. It's like, okay. I got it. I am a glorious weirdo the other day. It's like, oh, that's so lovely.
What a compliment. Right? It captures you.
Yes. And currently, for those people who can't see me, my hair is currently orange on the bottom and purple and pink and a bit of blue through the middle.
And it's gorgeous.
Has been cut on the sides. It can be any length that we...
no length this time. I think it was purple and pink last time you saw it, with like a big flop over the side.
So tell us how long you've been in Ireland, Yvonne.
Okay, so I'm actually going on 7 years. So you guys have been stuck with me here for 7 years now.
And are you getting the 7-year itch and wanting to head back yet?
Absolutely. Hell no. I actually went back at summer over Christmas and really reminded myself about why I love Ireland. And why I'm never going back to Australia. Not only is it $19 for a glass of wine, I mean, seriously, but it's hot. Everything's trying to kill you.
So we get to keep you, Yvonne. That's brilliant. Absolutely. Yvonne, tell us about your move to Ireland as an OT. Why Ireland? Why did you choose our country?
It was actually really interesting. I had been working, in Australia, I also was lucky enough to develop one of the OT courses on the Gold Coast, which, people look at my old office where I could actually look out over the ocean and the mountains and go, why? Because we could see like the whales migrating. To be honest, Australia is fantastic, but I wanted to travel. So I looked at different places where English speaking, because that's my only language, is Australian, as you'll find out later. It's very different to Irish. Jen's laughing. She's seen my stuff ups regularly. But I guess, and so I looked at the UK and Ireland, and luckily enough, I applied for a job at UCC and a couple other places. I got them, and I chose UCC, University College Cork, mainly because it was a small little place, and it's sort of teaching team, and it was more used to what I was used to in Australia. So
And what was the process like in terms of coming over? How easy was it to get registered over here?
Well, for me, it was, I rocked up just as they were actually bringing in Koru here. So in Australia, we'd had a registration across Australia since about 2010, I think it was when we first got it. So I was used to the process over there. It was expensive. It can be expensive, but if there's any people listening that want to move to another country and want to get registered in another country, keep all of your academic transcripts, your details of your supervisors, how many hours, where you did, and all of that stuff. Please keep them.
Sorry? Isn't module handbooks, because I got registered as an OT in New Zealand at one point, and I couldn't believe that they needed the detail of what was covered in the modules in university.
Absolutely. So if you're going to go to Australia, and it was the same here, you had to provide the module handbooks, what you were tested on, how they met, how many hours, where you did your placement, what you did, all of those sorts of details. Unfortunately, Sydney Uni lost my information. So luckily, thank goodness, I was already registered in Australia because I couldn't prove that I'd done my 1,000 hours of clinical placement.
Mine was very similar. We came at the same time and qualified probably a similar time to you, and they didn't really use computers in the same way. That makes me sound so old, but they didn't store our records on computers. So they had filing cabinets and then moved building and got rid of all of the transcripts and all of the information. So absolutely hold on to them as long as you can.
Yeah. I always say definitely hold on to them. And things like it was really difficult, not difficult, it was really interesting because I wasn't used to a lot of the terminology here. And it's such a smooth process, I guess, in Australia. A lot of it's online, whereas when I was here, I had to print everything out. Everything was hard copies. I was like, really?
Yeah. But
yeah,
you got there in the end.
I did. You guys got hold of me in the end, and I can practice as an OT. So I don't just practice as an OT lecturer, I also practice as an OT in private practice as well. So can't stop me.
Yvonne, as a lecturer in UCC, you've got an overview around the undergraduate training in Ireland, and then you're also familiar with it in Australia. Can you give us a bit of a compare and contrast over the two journeys between, studying as an OT in Australia versus Ireland?
Yeah. And also it's great they're both Wilford accredited, but I guess it has been really interesting. What I will say is every university course is way different. So different. The OTs from Ireland are very well respected. So people who've been trained in Ireland are really well respected over in Australia. In saying that, so as I said, I was lucky enough to write the course where I was up from scratch, and I became an OT lecturer because I got sick of clinicians coming straight out of university with all theory and no skills. So the course where I was really focused on like practical skills and report writing and all that sort of like real, hands-on in your clinical reasoning sort of thing. So that was really good. I think one of the major differences, and guys, I know Jen's already told you I'm blunt. I also tend to swear a bit. I'm trying my hardest not to swear on the podcast.
You're all right. We're Irish. We're used to it. Grant.
But so placements in Australia, there's something like 39 different OT courses in Australia now. And they take between 50 to 200 students.
Wow.
And they are pumping them out. But I saw, and I must send you this quote, guys. I saw this fantastic quote. I was reading the Australian News the other day, and they were talking about how this GP practice out in the middle of nowhere had actually, like when I say out the back of beyond or beyond the black stump, sort of, when we're talking about rural in Australia, we're talking 10 hours right west, driving at 100 k's an hour on straight roads. Okay, that's rural. Not even remote. Remote's further than that. So one of these this clinician started up like their creche in a GP sort of private practice, and they said, "Oh, it's really hard to get creche workers. They're like trying to get an OT, and they're as rare as hen's teeth." I know. So that's that is how the opportunities for OT in Australia are. They are crying out for people. They're crying out for people out in sort of rural, remote areas. And so we would place students out in rural, remote areas. So we're talking like, you're out for a 6-8 week placement, 10-week placement. Like at one stage I had OT students. So I had some of them up in sort of Rockhampton. That was going through a cyclone and flooding at the time. So that's a 10-hour drive north along the East Coast. And then I was trying to get the other students, I was trying to talk them through trying to get to the sort of Victoria and New South Wales that had bushfires at that time. So I was like directing them, driving through the bush and going, okay, you need to take the next motorway. Don't take this one. It's cut off by bushfires. Go this way.
Wow. That's a very different experience to hear.
Way different. And the other thing that I think is fantastic about having those experiences in Australia, and it's really different from here, is when you do those placements, especially when they're really out west, etc., it's the exposure to the different cultures, especially the Indigenous and the Torres Strait Islanders, the Australian Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders, like that exposure and working with those communities. I mean, there can be really, really challenging situations. Can get, you know me, I'll get distracted by things. So you've got to keep me on track, guys.
The cultural differences and the experience of adapting to those and being respectful of them and incorporating them into your practice, that's a huge contrast to working in Ireland, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I've got to say, like the OT courses are really quite good still at being, developing cultural awareness and cultural humility and all that sort of stuff compared to some of the other ones. I was talking to another lecturer from a different profession who said, "Oh yeah, no, our cultural competence training. Don't get me started on that stuff. It's about how we lay the dead out." I'm like, So
It's a start.
Yeah, it is, but it's just like it really highlighted how far ahead OT, especially in Ireland, is from compared with their ideas about cultural competence and all that sort of stuff compared to other health professions. And I think that's something to absolutely crow about. The difference is that we don't get the same exposure that you would in Australia.
Yeah. Yeah.
So for OTs from Ireland going over to Australia, there might be a bit of a steep learning curve.
Very much, I reckon, that cultural humility. So, it is drummed into us since first year, like slammed into every student from first year about not just the socioeconomic and the different cultures of disability and things like that, but also ethnicity. Like one of my placements was at Jewish Care Disability Services. So that was really challenging, especially at that time we were having bomb threats and stuff like that. And there's also threats for the Muslim community. And I went out and saw, like, we had people who were Muslim in the Jewish Care Disability Services in Australia. You could get anyone, but it's really understanding that you have to ask because, the students have heard this before. Like, I still remember as a student having to do a shower assessment with somebody who was from a Muslim background and going, trying to, I was a young female, they had a spinal cord injury, me trying to make sure that they were so, being so culturally appropriate. And he turned around and said, "What are you fucking doing?" I was like, "I'm trying to give you your privacy." And it's like, "There is none in hospital. Get bloody well, get on it, would you?" I said, "Okay."
At least you had the awareness. It was trying,
but it's also not making those assumptions. But
that's the big thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Asking people.
And I suppose one of the challenges, and we spoke about it with one of the Cork students a few weeks ago, is around increasing diversity in the profession of occupational therapy, because certainly in Ireland we're very white, middle class, female dominated profession. We want to be representative of the people that we serve. Do you feel Australia, is there things that we can learn from the system there in terms of how we increase diversity in our profession?
Yeah, there's some things. I mean, I still don't think Australia's doing a great job of it either. I think maybe Canada might be doing fantastic work over there, but like some of the stuff, like one of the things that I really did find is coming to here. So where I was teaching in Australia and where I worked in Australia was a lower socioeconomic area. So when I started teaching where I was all of a sudden, like, I had 60% of my students were the first in family to go to university, and 30% of them were over 30. That really changed. Whereas, I got here and I still remember being so shocked at how young and privileged these students were to get into the courses here. You have to be so privileged. One of the things I did back in Australia, which I thought was really good, was from the local areas. If you came from a lower socioeconomic area, you got extra points just given to you to get into the course. So that really, I think, it's not brilliant, but it did do something to help address some of that
starting to in the scales a little bit, because I guess, the points for OT in Ireland are very, very high. In Ireland, for anyone who's international, we've got a system where you need a certain number of academic points, but a lot of people would do extra tuition or, go to really good schools to try and get those extra points. So it's not based on, I see you laughing there, Yvonne, because you're thinking of the word grinds, aren't you? It means something very different in Australia, but in Ireland, grinds are the extra tuition that we get. But unless your family can afford that, it just adds an extra layer of challenge to try and get the points. And actually, OT as a profession, yes, we're an academic science-based profession, but we're also a very people-focused profession, and the relational piece is so important. So I wonder, sometimes, are we missing capturing that?
I think not even missing capturing. I think we can be doing harm by not, and so often, and I've heard it come out of people's mouths, the discrimination, not just against lower socioeconomic, they just make these assumptions that people can just do this. Or it's like, oh, they're just not trying, or they're non-compliant. Instead of really going I was very privileged because I watched some of these students, and I don't come from I come from a single mum family. I was, yes, they'd gone to university, but I didn't come from, say, a standard white neutral family. And, but some of my students were like, they had 4 kids, some of them with learning disabilities or autism. So they were trying to do full-time study whilst juggling their family, paying for their mortgages, and racking up a massive debt. I think if we are not, I think by not acknowledging and not increasing our diversity, we actually alienate ourselves. And so not only can we do harm, we alienate ourselves from people. No wonder no one knows who OTs are.
Yeah, because they're not seeing it.
And I think it's not just about accessing university, it's about the supports then once you get to university. So for some of these people, okay, getting in, but then sustaining their university placement and getting through to the end and, performing well enough to be able to graduate, that also needs a lot of attention, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And sometimes as academics, and also depending where you've come from and your background, like, we can be very discriminatory. We can be very biased. We forget, and we are not trying. Well, I guess I landed into Ireland in the middle of a rental crisis going, crap. Wow, and then we're expecting students to be able to, so someone's having, and, some of the people that I've worked with, or have come to my university back in Australia, they worked while they're at school to help make their family end meet, like to actually pay bills for the family.
Yeah.
How can someone do that when they're doing placement full time for 10 weeks? And if you go out to rural areas and things like that, there's sometimes some grants that you can get in Australia, where if you agree to go work in those areas for 2 years post graduation, they'll pay for your wages and stuff over while you're doing placement.
Great. That sounds great.
It would be fantastic to get that sort of stuff in.
When you kind of look at having worked in Ireland now for a few years and comparing that the other way, is there anything that you think actually we're doing fairly okay in Ireland and maybe Australia could implement or learn from Irish OTs?
Oh, there's lots of stuff that we could, if we can't learn something, we're idiots. There's a lot of things. Like, number one, the crack. Got a great sense of humor and can be really, really a really good ability to work with people and get people on side as clinicians. I've watched the students and watched OTs do it, and it's just brilliant. And there are some really inventive and emerging areas of practice, like like the forestry work that's being done. So having OTs in forests.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Forest bathing, the power of nature.
They actually have an OT in Wiltshire.
Wiltshire, yeah. Well pronounced. Close. Well done. They have an OT in Wiltshire.
I still struggle with those. So there's an OT who actually is employed by that word.
Our Forestry Commission.
Struggling to encourage engagement in occupations in the forests. That's great work. We'd love to have that sort of stuff in Australia.
Yeah.
Yvonne, you always talk about the proactive aspect of the healthcare system in Australia. That's probably a big pro for working as an OT in Australia, to be part of that. Can you tell us a wee bit more about what sort of areas are they really proactively looking at health and well-being and...
Yeah, look, there's a lot of different. So OTs in Australia will often also work in sort of health promotion. So it's like, for example, some of my graduates worked in, say, urgent Indigenous as a companies. There's a fantastic program. I think Jodie's still on it, from UQ graduate, called the Deadly Ears program, and the OTs there work with the Indigenous cultures. For those of you who there's a high instance of deafness in the Indigenous population, the First Australians, due to recurrent ear infections.
Goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's a whole nother podcast. So the sort of things and the similarities between, say, traveling communities and stuff. But so what the OTs were doing is they worked with the elders and the local communities and some sort of like, Indigenous football stars and stuff like that to develop up health promotion programs, from policies to adverts with footy players, to teaching parents skills about ensuring that their kids don't get recurrent ear infections, because obviously you guys know this, child has a ear like deafness, how it's going to impact not just their social development, their education, and that's social determinants of health, and that impacts for lifelong. So there's some really fabulous health promotion stuff, or the stuff that the OTs are doing from a health promotion point of view. Sorry,
do you see any of that creeping in here into Ireland? Any examples that you
I'm sure there are. There's some really innovative stuff happening. We just got to get more. I see a real pushback. I find the one thing that's really different, I found when I first came to Australia, is the sort of protectiveness of, no, that's our role. OTs will say, no, we do that, or nursing says that we do that. Whereas I was so used to in Australia, like if you're even on the Gold Coast where I was working in clinical, like my physio and I we work together. I'd do the mobility assessments and she'd do the, the handrail stuff, measuring for handrails. We actually trained with each other. So she could do all the simple stuff. Like she's really good at biomechanics. She knows how to raise I told her how to do the, where she could get the equipment and how to write up the forms. But like she knows how far the chair should be raised for someone to get off it. She's better at that than me. So we would actually really use our strengths and
crossover.
Yeah, it's called interprofessionally. Oh, sorry, not interprofessional, but like we'd really transprofessional. Like we'd really, transdisciplinary. So yeah, you'd really kind of like work,
share skills.
Yeah, it's not so much this is what I do. Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm good at this, you're good at that. Let's work together.
It's getting away from the kind of siloed approach.
Yeah, I think we are moving slightly, not fast enough, but I think we are moving slightly more towards that. Like Jen and I have both worked in transdisciplinary teams before. Jen, you're the only other person I've met that's worked in another organisation that takes that transdisciplinary approach. But I see it a wee bit more in the health service coming through too, that we aren't being as protective of roles. But I do agree, Yvonne, I would have seen that throughout the years, that OTs, right? No, that's not my, it's nearly like shutters go down, that's not my role and I'm not going to get involved in that. But yet the child then, or the client is the person that suffers, because, they're waiting on another waiting list to see that particular professional. But we all have core skills that we can cross over with.
So, instead of making that person sit on another waiting list, like I understand it's good to get the funding and stuff for it, but instead of doing that, how about we use our basic stuff? I'm going to be real unpopular for this one. The OT physical versus OT mental health in adults. how? Why does the person need to be on a waiting list to see an OT or a psychologist in mental health when we have skills? We can at least do something.
I think so much of it is like the confidence, as a profession, we just seem to lack confidence in being able to say, yeah, we're comfortable enough in our skills and in our unique contribution that we're okay with other people kind of doing a little bit of it, or us kind of pushing boundaries and kind of being confident that our core principles are guiding what we're doing and that we're working safely.
Yeah.
But it's taking time, I think, in Ireland for us to kind of go, yeah, no, we're fine. We don't need to keep kind of the boundaries around us, keep our area, free from other disciplines.
I guess if you're doing a home visit for 5 hours, you're driving for 5 hours to do a home visit, and then you're going to do everything you can instead of trying to get someone else to come out for a 5 hour visit and do, and that's maybe where it's come from in Australia, is just those long distances and those isolations and things like that. But
I remember as well as an undergraduate being taught about staying within your professional boundaries. And I think they nearly went too far with that it was very much drummed into us that this is your role and don't go past that. Whereas I do think this new approach as a transdisciplinary, I think even therapists specialising in particular areas that they can then cross over a little between each other. That's helpful. You can be confident in an area like, I suppose, autism or
edema.
Lymphedema, yeah,
that's my area as well. So homelands and lymphedema and ulcers. I mean, I'm a lymphedema therapist qualified as well, but my specialty area is leg ulcers, of all things. Now, the nurses look at me like I've got two heads on, because I'm like, yeah, my research area, my PhD is about leg ulcers and compression. They're like, huh? Whereas in Australia, I was part of a team. Where are the OTs on the wound management?
And presumably then, Yvonne, you're linking that it's not just the ulcer, it's the impact of the ulcer on occupation and on daily function, right?
But how I got involved in this is I had a brilliant example. I got sent out to put this is in the private practice, I got sent out to put a lift into a gentleman's house. And I always laugh. He was so much fun. We had an absolute ball, but they're about to amputate his leg because he'd had an ulcer for 2 years. And so I looked at it and I went, it's dodgy to get the thing out, but it's like, can we ever try healing this leg? And he looked at me. So I worked with the wound care nurse, the GP, the nurses, and the bloke himself, obviously, because he was the one that sort of coordinated us all. We had it healed in 8 weeks.
Wow.
We just had to work together really well, and he kept his leg. Now, that ulcer being healed meant that he could go back driving. That meant he could go to his old bastards club, which I love that. It's literally called the Old Bastards Club. He'd walk down the stairs. It means he could walk down his stairs and across the road to the Surf Lifesavers Club and have a glass of wine. Not that he was supposed to, but he knew what the outcomes were. Us working together really enhanced his ability to do that.
And really looking holistically there, Yvonne, at, everything, not just, okay, this piece of equipment. It's actually, why do we need this? What's the underlying challenge? What's the problem? What's it stopping the person doing? And then what's the best approach? Is it compensatory or is it actually rehab? It's so interesting because, lymphedema, when you think about it, you don't think about occupational therapy, you think about skin or you think about the area. Whereas it's the impact is huge.
Absolutely. I still remember doing lymphedema and, I'll start talking about sex in a second, but, dealing with, she's like, yeah, Yvonne, sex is always going to come up with this with you. But working with people about lymphatic drainage or something like that and figuring out what works with their system meant that they actually felt attractive again, or meant that they could actually be intimate with their partner again. I mean, that's huge. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think we sometimes need to, and look, being funded by the medical system and usually a medical acute system really impacts our thinking. And that's why we've just got to keep remembering why we're OTs.
Yeah, coming back to the core.
That occupation is so important. So very passionate about that.
And it's one of the joys of private practice that you can really, you're not boxed in to a particular funding stream as such.
No, it's great fun. It's great fun. Sorry, Dean, I cut you off. I just jumped
You can
over you.
explore a little bit more as a private practitioner in the areas that you see that you're passionate about. Yeah. Yvonne, we're going to finish off with quick fire questions, starting off with one pro and one con to OT in Australia.
One pro is the range of different things that you can do, jobs you can do. No, you can't get bored. Cons, there's a lot of the stuff, say, if you're working in, say, insurance stuff like NDIS or work cover or return to work, injured workers, you've got to be really good at justifying. You've got to be so you need to be doing your billable hours. Something we don't teach here, but doing billable hours and really hitting into that sort of private practice and being really confident. Okay.
So funding and that sort of thing is more of a challenge. So trying to
it's also funding. It's about our skill of actually like having to do billable hours. Whereas, if you work in a public health system, it's like, I'm doing more work.
Yeah. Okay. So do you mean advocating for the profession there to justify your role? Is that what you mean?
No, they love OTs, especially in OC rehab. We are classified, they'll listen to us rather than a GP.
Great. Okay.
We're actually, that's probably a really good strength, actually, probably a better strength in OT. They know what we do, they recognize our skills, and Jesus, they actually listen to us.
Love it.
But what about a pro and a con of living in Australia?
I'm so the worst person. Okay, the pro, it is spectacular, beautiful country. Okay, and you get the food. I miss the food. That's it, the food. Con, it depends where you go. But it's really, really so expensive and to live there at the moment. And everything is trying to kill you. Like, I'm not joking.
The spiders.
Everything's trying to kill you. No, spiders are fine. There's only two things that try and kill you. It's snakes, stinging trees, otherwise known as suicide trees, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, nasty things. Yeah, box jellyfish, irukandjis. Yeah, I'll keep going. And the koalas.
Okay, pro and con to OT in Ireland.
Okay, the pro in Ireland is it is quite a defined. We know what we're doing here, and it's actually gaining knowledge and presence here. Okay. Con, I think we're stuck in the medical system still. I'd love to see us. I honestly believe, like, absolutely, OT's needed in the medical system in the HSC. But we flourish. We do so well. We are perfect fit also outside the medical system. And I'd love to see us grow so much further than that. But that's got to come from the schools, the training colleges.
I agree, Yvonne. I am really enjoying, as a private practitioner, working more in the education system, listening to myself in schools and the carryover then whenever it's in the child's own environment with the supporting adults, that they can continue things on between sessions. And that's only one example. There's so many other environments that we can be in and move in, expanding.
I mean, we're starting to get there. I mean, Jen, the stuff that you're doing too online and stuff is fantastic. It's so needed, which I realized it wasn't here when I first arrived here. But it's great to see. But, where there's so much opportunities, so many opportunities for OT to grow in Ireland.
We just need OTs to be brave and step up and take up those opportunities or create them.
Yeah, we need leaders, and we need the colleges and us OTs, and also, the crew to give us the opportunities, and AOTI to support that stuff as well. Like, we naturally need to work instead of silos together. Brilliant. But that's me. I play well with others.
You're so passionate, Yvonne, about the profession and about the future of the profession and contributing to it. What is next for you?
PhD. I'm going to plug my PhD. If anyone's got anyone with a healed ulcer.
You need people with healed ulcers who are willing to get involved in your research.
Family members. What's next for me? I need to get the PhD done. There's so many opportunities. I just need to figure out what and which ones, working with the Cork Stroke Support Group and developing up, sexuality and intimacy stuff with them and the cancer groups. I've got so many ideas. I just, one at a time.
PhD over the line, and then we'll talk. Fantastic. Yvonne, thank you so much for joining our community in Ireland and for becoming an Irish OT. I don't think we'll call you an Australian OT anymore. You are one of us.
I'm almost got my Irish citizenship. I'm on the way.
Yeah, fantastic. All the boxes ticked. We really appreciate you. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as always, it's always fun chatting with you guys. You're legends.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trachak.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.